Welcome to part 8 of my series of talks on what did you do in the Cold War, Daddy. Part 7 we talked about the support helicopters and the serious nature of the annual NATO autumn exercises. In part 8 I'm going to talk about an actual flight we did right up to the border, up and close to the closed border. In order to do this in our helicopter, which was ideally suited for the task, we had to fly with an officer of the British Frontier Service in the co-pilot seat. British Frontier Service was a non-government organisation, civilian organisation, but working for the UK government and the Federal Republic of Germany government as well, based in Bonn, and to supervise the British sector of interest on the northern part of the border. It was set up at the end of the Second World War. The officers in it were, without exception, all retired military. They wore Royal Navy uniforms, and for some reason they had honorary army ranks, although actually ranks, I think, was down to their particular choice to suit the occasion they were in. The thing was, though, they knew the border, the actual physical border, the nature of the border, the geography, the layout, as well as they knew the back of their hands. So, as we approached the aerodrome at Lubeck, the runway was clearly visible, and as I lowered the collective lever to gently touch down the main wheels onto the grass beside the runway, I sensed something not quite right nearby. Parking brake on, speed select levers back to ground idle. The blur of the rotor disc slowly morphed into 4 individual blades. My crewman had already popped outside and has signalled me that the droop stops that prevent the blades collapsing to the ground were in, and I was therefore now clear to shut off the fuel. The whine of the known turbines wound down and the blades came to a gradual stop as I applied the overhead hydraulic rotor brake lever. All switches off and I climbed down. I was acutely aware for some reason of the sound of the clicking as the jet pipes cooled down and they contracted, and of the blades flapping gently in the breeze that crept over the airfield. Remember, helicopter blades are very flexible. I looked around, and something sinister, particularly as I looked east towards the border. The scene dark and gloomy. Was it my imagination, or was it brighter to the west? A Land Rover pulled up alongside the Wessex, and a rather grand figure in his Royal Navy commander's uniform climbed out and cheerily waved. Moments later, I raised the collective lever, and together with Flight Lieutenant Shepherd, we lifted off in XR 504 and headed off to the southeast. The border, or the inside border as it was known later, passed just to the end of the runway. So we headed off southeasterly to give our guide time to tell us what we could expect to see and what we could expect to witness. The great thing about flying helicopters is that you have the ability to fly slower, lower, and if necessary come to a complete stop. And that is what we did. Hovering about 30 feet above the ground with the noisy downwash from our 56-foot diameter rotor disc flattening the ground underneath, accompanied with the raucous racket caused by the vibration set up, the whine of the turbines, and the view distorted by the heat haze from the exhaust pipes. Despite all that, we still got a good view, and both to our sitting in the cockpit and to our crewmen sitting in the open cabin door. Even after all these years, it is still the sobering images that flash through the mind. We faced the actual border line head on, and our BFS guide gave a running commentary. Ahead, you can see the chain link fence. Just in front of that are the actual border marker posts. Behind the fence and beyond is an anti-personnel minefield, and floodlights are on all night. I pivoted us around as he directed a spot turn. Over yonder, and he waved his hand in emphasis, a watchtower. Well, actually, that's quite new as an afterthought. Over to the left, a suggestion that we hover over. We'll get a better look. I eased over on the cyclic control and tweaked the collective, and we inched leftwards as directed. No mines here, only dogs. A pause then. We know that there are hidden microphones and tripwires, and we know the East German Volkspolizei personnel regularly patrol the border roads. Armed? I asked, actually rather naively, I reflected later. Of course. In fact, last week a person from the East tried to cross just over there and was shot dead for his pains. We hover taxied up and down for a few more minutes, but the whole atmosphere was gloomy, and when our time was up, I heeled the Wessex up and over and we flew at maximum speed to Lübeck. Once out of ground effect and into the upper air, a sense of relief pervaded. We dropped off our guide and departed the airfield, heading towards our destination Fassberg for our next task. We flew on in silence, preoccupied with our thoughts on what we had just been witness to. The very real face of the Cold War. It had been an experience of a lifetime, but we as humans have short-term memories. Once our comfort zone of normal life resumes, we quickly forget the extreme experience, no matter how severe. And once clear of the inside border area, we were quickly back in our comfort zone, and life was back to normal. So it was quite a jerk on the memory cords when many, many years later, I was given a sharp reminder of that border recce day in that July of 1970. And it was in the most unlikely of circumstances the memory was rekindled. It was during a conversation I was having with a recently recruited simulator instructor during my second flying career with Cathay Pacific Airways based in Hong Kong. The simulator and myself, we were introduced during the briefing session for my upcoming Boeing 747-400 simulator flight. It transpired that our paths had crossed years before. In fact, during my helicopter time in the Royal Air Force. He at that time was a Lightning fighter pilot based at RAF Gütersloh, which is where we did our monthly detachments in the late 60s, early 70s. As it happened, he was still based in Germany at the time of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Before he returned to UK, out of curiosity that most pilots display, he travelled into the former East Germany. He came across a scrapyard that attracted his attention because of military vehicles and aeroplane parts all perched on top of a pile of scrap. As he looked closer inside, he could see a whole collection of signboards and posts. They were brand new and appeared to be of road and place names. But he didn't recognise any street signs that he might have been familiar with. But on inquiry with the very helpful staff, it transpired that these signs were planned for use in the post-invasion occupation of West Germany. They were designed to rename the streets and towns and villages. In other words, to rewrite history and obliterate the past.